Hello, and happy Friday. Coming to you live again from the Harold Washington Community College in Chicago, Illinois, where I am part of the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses program. Today we were talking about growth opportunities for our businesses, and they came around and gave us fake money. And they said, okay, what would you do with $5,000? What would you do if you had $50,000? And then they said, okay, what would you do if somebody gave you $5 million? And it sounds like, I would be able to spend that quickly, but it's harder than you think. But it's also exciting to be able to dream that big for a business that you feel so passionate about, as I do in the adoption industry. And I think I took a couple million out to put into our nonprofit, Back to the Roadmap Fund, which, if you don't know, I started a nonprofit this past summer, although I haven't really rolled it out yet or done much about it yet, but that will be coming soon. And our adoption process is called the Adoption Roadmap. That's the process that we have put together to walk people through their whole adoption journey and how we work with them. As you may or may not know, about 25% of adoptions end up in a fall through or a failed adoption, where perhaps an expectant mother will change her mind at the last minute and just decide, I had good intentions the whole way, I just can't do this. Or, for many different reasons, a fall through can happen. Unfortunately, with a fall through, there's typically a pretty significant financial loss. And so for our families, we give those families a small grant to not only show them that we're in this with you for the ups and for the downs, and we want to help you move forward. So I took some of that, couple million of that $5 million fictitious money, and I put it into our nonprofit so that we can help even more families, perhaps even beyond our own clientele, when you experience a failed adoption. So dreaming big, and maybe we'll get there, but we'll start small and we'll continue to help one family at a time. I want to just show you my view right now because it's pretty awesome. I'm in downtown Chicago. Oh, look, just on cue, here comes a nice boat, probably doing an architectural boat tour, but what an awesome view, huh? Pretty sweet. So anyways, that's kind of what we were dreaming. We were dreaming big today, and I have some big opportunities that I will be excited to share with you as they unfold. Can't talk about them yet, but I will, and I have no thoughts of leaving this industry anytime soon, and only continuing to grow. So as you know, our topic for the month, we're trying something new, and I would love to hear from you. Have you been enjoying this idea of having one topic for a full month to really dive in a little bit deeper, or would you rather hear about all sorts of things randomly? So this month in January, we have been focusing on open adoption. Today, we've been sharing with you different stories of open adoption, favorite quotes about open adoption, some of our client stories that talk about open adoption, and also how the idea of openness doesn't just mean visits face-to-face or in connection with the birth family or the biological family, but it also means how adoption is talked about with the child that you have brought into your family through adoption, how it's talked about, how it's brought up, how often it's brought up, the space that you create for you and your child and your family around adoption. And that's what we mean when we talk about open adoption. One of the things that just kind of popped into my head today as I was not knowing what I was going to talk about and trying to find an empty classroom, as you see, was this idea of two things. I recently saw a post from somebody asking, when should we tell our child that they were adopted? Once I kind of push my judgment of horror aside, I have to remember that maybe not everybody is educated about that and doesn't know, but it's really imperative, I believe, to start that conversation the day your child is born. Now, I realize I'm just talking about private infant adoption. I know that some people adopt a little bit later, although if it's later, they probably know they were adopted. But for infant adoption, I really believe that it's imperative to start that conversation and start telling your child their story from day one. You want your child to know how they were brought into your family as soon as they start knowing their name, your name. You know, you want it to just be part of what they have known their entire life. And the words that you use are not going to be easy when you first start out. You're going to stumble and you're not going to know quite what to say or how to refer to certain people or what to say and what not to say. And you're going to stumble. And you know what? When they're an infant, they don't know because they don't know what you're saying. They just hear the sound of your voice and it's lovely. They love hearing it. So by the time they do understand, you'll have all those kinks worked out. And eventually they'll be able to process it, not for a while. I think it was around the age of 2, I think it was 2 when I first noticed that my son was starting to process what this word adoption meant. And it comes out in various ways. It may be a reaction to a song. It may be just noticing different people around them and trying to relate it to who they are. There's many different ways that it manifests, but I think that you will start to notice things about, because you never quite know, do they understand this? Do they get it? Do they understand what adoption is? You'll start to see signs of and connect the dots to tell you that they are starting to process it. Now, the other piece of this is that I was thinking about was siblings. Sibling order plays into this. So, for instance, my son was the firstborn. So when he was born, there were no siblings, at least that we knew of. And then there were. In my case, and I'm not sharing anything that I think he would have a problem with me sharing. In my case, he had always dreamed about having sisters and brothers. But when he was young, it wasn't appropriate to tell them, well, you do have sisters and brothers, but they're half siblings and they don't live with us and they're your biological. He wouldn't have been able to process that or get that. Anyways, so in his case, he always talked about having brothers and sisters. And at the beginning, when I knew that his birth mother had more children, he was still too young to understand what that meant. Or, when he's young, if I would have told him, he would have been wondering where they were and not understanding how I was telling him he was a brother, and yet there were no other kids in our house. So obviously some things you have to wait and talk to at whatever level they're at. But I think I told him, now we've always had an open adoption. And even though there were kids maybe in a FaceTime, he still didn't put 2 and 2 together. Until I thought maybe he was. And that was the time for me to talk about, those kids that you've been seeing, they are actually, and you know how you've always wanted to be a big brother? Well, you actually are. And he was like, huh? So you have to understand your children, but this is all part of the process of open adoption, is being able to have those conversations, being able to know when to take it one step further and to talk a little bit more about their story developmentally. So open adoption means so much more than the relationship that you have with the biological family. It's about how we talk about it. It's about creating the space to talk about it. And as I'd mentioned before, it's about bringing it up enough to let our children know that it is not off, a subject that we don't talk about, but it's welcome. Because children often turn to protecting us, and they don't want to bring up things that they think will hurt us. So that's probably one of the most important lessons that I have learned since I adopted 8.5 years ago, that I've heard from other adoptees. They didn't think they could talk about it because it was never talked about. Such an important lesson. So I guess the two most important things or maybe three, that I'm trying to talk about today is starting to tell your child their story from day one, practicing it to get out the kinks, reveal more about their story developmentally as time goes on. You'll see the signs and you'll be able to know. And then three, what was the third thing I said? Creating a safe space and bringing up the topic of adoption, even if your child is not, to let them know that the topic is okay. So I hope that helps. I know that the word open adoption, especially when you're just starting out in the journey, can feel really scary. But I'm here to tell you that most likely what you're scared of in your mind are the myths around open adoption. And I want to create the space for any of you who have those fears to talk through them with me or our community. We at RG Adoption Consulting, myself, my consultants, our community, are a safe space to talk about some of these things. The light just went off. And it's important to talk through them, because if they are really myths that you're thinking in your head, you need to know that to feel a little bit more hopeful and more, and less scared. Anyways, that's my message today. I hope that you took something from it. I'd love to know what you did take from this message. If you could just comment below or ask whatever questions that you have. That's it. The lights went out in the room, and I think that's my signal to take off. So I'm going to go have some lunch and then go back to learning and dreaming big about the world of adoption. So thanks for tuning in, guys. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.